All right, let's do it live on a First Friday Miracle edition of the program. Welcome into Cleveland Browns Daily. I am merely Beau. He is the great Z. And let's get right to it, buddy. We have emails this morning and announcements, and this is our reality.
It is our reality. The Cleveland Browns today placed Jack Conklin, Charlie Hewlett, and Cody Parkey on the reserve COVID-19 list. We'll hear from head coach Kevin Stefanski later in the show, but he spoke earlier today and said it was based on them being close contacts to an outside contractor who has tested positive. Now, the time frame is such that it is possible they would be able to go on Sunday if they continue to test negative. Obviously, with Chris Hubbard out, Conklin going on creates a vacuum at tackle. Now, Kendall Lamb would step in 2 years ago, started 13 games at right tackle for the Houston Texans. Last year, started a couple games for the Cleveland Browns. But obviously not ideal. Long snapper, Charlie Hewlett. Now, that's a specialty position. There are two candidates on the roster. One, Stiff Arm Steve. The other, someone that you had nominated to play fullback the other day, Mac Wilson, can actually do a little bit of long snapping. So those two could perhaps fill that
linebackers
role.
and tight ends, right? They're the ones who can do those roles.
They're the ones. And then you got Cody Parkey, but the Browns, as we said, it's funny, we talked about it yesterday. The 16-person practice squad enables you to keep – we talked about two positions that would never be on a practice squad. A fullback, who you might need, Johnny Stanton. Then we mentioned the kicker, Matthew McCrane. You might need him this week. And it'd be a shame. Cody Parkey, underappreciated. One of the things we have not talked enough about just how darn good Cody Parkey has been this season. And, you know, he knows kicking into that dog pound. He's done it. He's hit that stinger from 40-plus 2 games in a row when everybody else kicking that direction is baffled. So these are big. The hope that they test negative and they're able to come back in time. I don't believe Charlie or Cody necessarily need practice. Jack Conklin, same thing. So these are guys that you don't feel like need the work. They'll be ready to go if they're able to.
Couple of things. One on Parkey. Boy, are you right. The kickers are a lot like officials. You don't even really want to notice them.
Yep. And
you don't even notice Parkey, which is the highest compliment you can give him. Because the idea when you run a kicker out is they make it. They always make it. That's the expectation. Always make it. And he does. And he's been great. And it is such a relief to not have to worry about that in any way. So that is a big one. Hewlett you mentioned, and obviously Stiff Arm Steve, and even my guess would be Stiff Arm Steve if Charlie was out this week. I don't think you'd have Mac doing that. And then with Jack. So let's just go over the specifics on this. From a best case scenario, the soonest is this the Roethlisberger situation where the soonest that they could be back would be Saturday?
I think it's Saturday or Sunday, yeah, because I think it's at least 3 days, right? So it would be after the week's practices have concluded. They would be playing without practicing.
And I don't know the answers, and I don't know if you are, and I apologize for putting you in a tough spot, but you're a big B. I'm guessing you'll be fine. Are these results from yesterday or from this morning?
I don't think that they are necessarily I don't know. Because
or just contact tracing, I guess.
It's contact tracing, but not
close
contact tracing from Andy Janovich. It's contract tracing, if I understood Kevin Stefanski correctly, from an outside contractor that they have seen. So I'm guessing, again, you don't want to speculate, but you guess maybe a physical therapist, something of that nature. A non-staff member, non-team member. It is a non-staff member that they are close contacts to.
Let me ask you this then, and you've been in this game a lot longer than I have from an NFL perspective. Non-staff is non-Browns employee / ownership, all that, correct? So when they say non-staff, it's somebody not associated with the Browns.
It is somebody who may be an outside contract, but who is not, yes, correct, not a Browns employee, not a coach, not a trainer, not someone under the auspices of our organization.
Okay. So those were the things that I wanted to clear up, just because those are questions that I have, and my guess is people out there have them as well. So that kind of tells you where you are, and this is the reality of we went through 8 weeks of a season and really nothing. really nothing. And then it's hit now. A couple of weeks in a row, hit on the bye week with Baker, hit with Hub, and now with Conklin, Hewlett, and Parkey. And these don't necessarily mean that these. And just to reiterate, guys, this is close contact. This isn't necessarily testing positive. Not that that's some sort of scarlet letter, and we've emphasized that a lot through the course of this. What is your understanding of Hubbard's situation in terms of when could he come back? And again, I don't expect you to have all these answers, buddy. I just am trying to understand this as well.
He is on the COVID-19 reserve list, and he will be there, my understanding is, until he can have 2 consecutive negative tests.
The way that Coach made it sound this morning is if you have indeed tested positive, that you're not just the contact tracing.
Yeah.
It's a minimum 10 days.
That's what I thought. It was at least a week.
Yeah, okay. Coach said minimum 10 days. You'll hear that actually in his comments coming up here in just a few minutes. But he doesn't say – I do believe, though, Nathan is right as well, though. You have to have X number of negative tests as well. So I'm not totally sure. We don't know. We don't know who's – we don't know who has it. We don't know who's been exposed to it. Not allowed to have any of that info.
No, sure, yeah, and it's one of those things from a just from a public health standpoint. You see, this is really raging at this point from a positive test, from a hospitalization standpoint, and from all of that standpoint. And so this was always going to cross over into football. It's pretty amazing that the NFL has had this little interruption to this point. But I think we all will be on our toes now going forward. Go ahead, Z.
All right. All NFL players who test positive for COVID-19 go through the same protocols. First, they are immediately isolated. They are forbidden to access team facilities and are not allowed to have any direct contact with fellow players or team personnel. They're immediately placed on the reserve COVID-19 list, which we know. Following a positive test, if a player is asymptomatic, he may return once. 10 days have passed since the initial positive test, or 5 days have passed since the initial positive test, and the player receives 2 consecutive negative PCR virus tests at least 24 hours apart within that 5-day period. So Hubbard would be back. You're back either in 5 days with 2, because they would probably consider that end up being more of a false positive, or it is 10 days. Following a positive test, if a player demonstrates symptoms, he can return. At least 10 days have passed since symptoms first appeared, and at least 72 hours have passed since he last experienced symptoms. In either case, a player who tests positive must be cleared by his team's head physician before returning. Additionally, all players who have tested positive and recovered will undergo additional cardiac screening. So that's where it stands with Chris Hubbard, and for those who have tested positive in terms of what they must do to get back onto the field. So obviously it's rigorous, significant, and for in the case of Chris Hubbard, you would chase it back 10 days is looking like the minimum, because I feel like at this point the 5 days has passed, right, with Chris Hubbard?
Yeah. I mean, yes. Yeah, so I think it would. So that's what Cam did. That's what Gilmore did. That's what those guys did in order to get back on the field of play was follow those protocols. So that is where you are. The good news is, and that there is good news here, is that everyone else is on the field, and the rest of this team is going forward. And we were already under the intensive protocols anyway, so you're a little bit of step of that. We've been in that since Baker, right? Have we been in the intensive since Baker?
Since Baker, we have been in the intensive, and here's kind of just to go what it is. With the high-risk close contacts, here's what happens. A club must place any player designated a high-risk close contact on the reserve COVID-19 list upon such designation. Such player will remain on that list until at least 5 days have passed since the date on which the player was last in contact with the infected individual. The player will be permitted to resume club activities on the 6th day after such exposure if all of his PCR tests, including the 5th from testing day, are negative. So, for example, we don't know right now when their last contact was with the person outside of the building. So if it were Sunday, if it were, for example, a chiropractor brought in or something of that manner from game day or Monday, then yes, they would be able to come back for Sunday. Today is Wednesday. If their last contact with this person turned out to be yesterday, Tuesday, you would have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. They should be eligible to come back either way, as long as it didn't happen today with their last contact.
Now, the one positive in all of this is we play at home Sunday.
Correct.
Because if we were on the road, we would leave Saturday. They would not be eligible for Sunday's game.
Correct. So if a player clears under this scenario outlined above.
Is that a rule or
Yes,
I'm sorry,
yes,
go ahead,
becoming eligible to participate on game day and whose club has an away game and is traveling prior to game day, the club may elect to transport the player to the away city via private transportation. In other words, the player may not travel with the team or otherwise participate in club activities until the 6th day after contact and upon returning a negative PCR test on that day. So what Gibbs is saying, and I believe this is what the Lions did with Matt Stafford, they flew him privately, kept him in his own area, his own hotel, didn't do anything until he was cleared to go. With the Steelers, as Gibbe pointed out in the huge P moment, that was a home game for them with Ben, so he was able to be doing his own thing and then come. We're lucky in the sense we don't have to make a decision on private transportation and isolating these three individuals. Were we going to Jacksonville, for example?
Yeah. Can you imagine if we went back a year and tried to explain to ourselves that this is the way we were going to start a segment on a – I mean, just try and wrap your head around that. Like,
try to wrap your head around
what?
explaining to
You're gonna be doing what?
2019 Beau going to the grocery store right now.
I know it. It's an incredible thing that we're living in. Those are your OBM Hot Topics, Ohio Business Machine preferred copy provider of your Cleveland Browns. Have all the X's and O's for your office. Call 216-485-2000 or visit ohiobusinessmachines.com.
And one other thing to note quickly, Myles Garrett is not practicing today. He does not feel well. He has not tested positive for COVID, but when a player does not feel well, they do not participate. If you remember a few weeks ago, Odell Beckham Jr., same thing. Didn't feel well, didn't come in, ended up never testing positive, and was good to go. So we'll keep you updated on Myles as that kind of plays out. But as you walk on, I mean, as you get ready here to turn the page to a Philadelphia Eagles team that has really struggled this year, that is in a bit of turmoil, but has, some talented names that you know and recognize. Myles not being there early, not a big deal, but certainly it bears something to watch in light of the environment that you just said we are living in it. And I believe now the Seattle Seahawks are the only team in the NFL that have not had a player on the reserve COVID-19 list.
Man, that's incredible.
That's it. That's the only one.
Are you a sports fan? Yeah. Are you a sports fan looking for a part-time weekend job? Get into the action at First Energy Stadium, home of your Browns. Wes is now hiring for part-time event staff and security. Apply online at weshiring.com. We are loaded up. Sal Paolantonio going to join us in the second hour. Bernie as well. Coming up next, Mark Sessler, NFL.com, joins us. Take a look at how we've looked in the first half, his impressions of your Cleveland Browns. Off and running here, Cleveland Browns Daily, 850 ESPN Cleveland. You're on. Rumpke Waste Recycling, family owned and operated since 1932. They've been in business for 87 years, keeping neighborhoods clean and green. The customers, employees, and communities, all part of the family. Visit rumpke.com to learn more. Time to head out on that fifth, third money line, joined by our good Mark Sessler, NFL.com. NFL Network joining us, of course, co-host of Around the NFL pod, and he does enjoy the Cleveland Browns. So that's always a good time to talk to Mark. And Mark, thanks so much for taking the time. Let's dive in on something that Nathan and I spent a lot of time talking about the last couple of days, and that is how to assess this team coming off of the last two games where the weather was the overwhelming storyline. How have you done it?
Well, I think it's if you look at the passing game, I don't know if I assess it or if I attempt to, because they talked about the insane wins before Sunday's game, where attempting a throw of 10 yards seemed impossible, and Mother Nature just took that out of the mix. But what I look at with the Browns and what they have consistently been able to do. And it's funny because I think I last talked with you guys back in August, and we knew they wanted to be a run-heavy team. We knew that, you'd see growth from Baker Mayfield, but it was important to have signed Austin Hooper as one of the better blocking tight ends who can do a lot more at that position as well. The return of a fullback, and Andy Janovich out this week, obviously. But when I look at Cleveland and what they've been able to do, basically with the run, I think that they basically are saying, this is our strength. You know what we're going to do each week. We're going to come at you. Houston stacked the box with 8+ men over and over. The Raiders did that. And last week, I thought that Cleveland basically showed that when they have all their horses back, it's not the same when you didn't have Wyatt Teller. It wasn't the same without Nick Chubb. And I think that Hunt and Chubb make each other so much more effective and cause so many problems for a defense. The Cleveland's version of power football is perfect and ideal for the AFC North in November and in December. And if they're healthy, the sky's the limit.
Sky is the limit. Certainly from that style of football, from that game plan, that game script, the Browns are as good as anybody. But I think the biggest question that we had over, I'll call it the final 9 games, was can this team throw the football when it needs to against good defenses? Baker obviously lights up Cincinnati every time, and that was a great, great game. That's the last game he played in what I would call decent conditions. And can you stop the pass? That has been another big Achilles heel. Those questions remain unanswered, wouldn't you say? And is that really what you're looking for? And with the wind supposed to be down this weekend, I think it's going to be perfect weather this weekend. You go to Jacksonville. Those next 2 weeks, you don't play the best opponents, but you have an opportunity, I think, to tune that aspect of your team up before you take on the Titans and the Ravens in back-to-back big games.
I'm with you. I mean, I think that the problem inside their own division is that when this pass attack faces intense pressure, we saw that against Pittsburgh, against Baltimore, they have problems. So there's a way to go with the passing game. I'm not all that surprised that that's the case, and you really may not see this scheme's version of Baker Mayfield until next season. I mean, we've seen moments of it, but to assess him over the course of a year, I'd say I'd like to see more. I want to see more growth. I want to see a couple drives where you say no other quarterback can do what it's just done. I think there are questions there. The defense leaves you concerned. I mean, the AFC is built with these tiers right now. And I think Cleveland, and it's progress over the course of the season, but they're in that tier with this other, grouping of 6-3 teams. I'd put them a little bit above the Colts, and I think that game showed that, a little bit below the Raiders. The Dolphins would have me concerned. Cleveland has, they're imperfect, but when they're able to play their kind of football the way they want to, arrow up. I think the concern is, are you there with a team like the Ravens or Steelers? It's great to have those 2 tests ahead. I would say that for them to sneak into the playoffs, and it's very possible you get a 10-win team that misses the playoffs, which is ironic because the 2007 Browns obviously did something similar. I think you're going to need to show up in that Baltimore game and take one of these AFC North teams down if you want to get to 11 wins and probably a playoff doorway.
Yeah, Mark, you're right. Not only do they still play the Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers, but also the Tennessee Titans, who are one of those teams at 6-3. There's 6 of them at 6-3, and they all have their flaws and they all have things that they do well. But there are teams that are playoff tested there in the sense of Tennessee and obviously Baltimore 14-2 a year ago. So you're going to have to. I think one of those is the one that you have to get, and then you got to take care of your business. And it's pretty wild. Okay, have you ever seen anything like this with 6 teams, 3 games over 500, 9 games into the season?
No, I haven't, and I think maybe sometimes you get that effect because you've got AFC divisions playing a division like the NFC East, which is so tilted in the other direction. But mathematically, I was thinking about that. I just have not seen anything like that this late in the year where I look at each team and say, I can't automatically cancel your record out. That I know that the truth will reveal itself, and you'll be a 7-9 team by the end. These are quality teams, and the AFC is just simply I think the better conference right now. In a team like the Dolphins that was completely out of the picture a few weeks ago, this is one of the best coached teams in the AFC. They have cupcakes over the next 3 weeks before they play the Chiefs. They could very easily be 9-3. So there are teams rising up and still developing and becoming what they are. Where I look at Cleveland, I think we kind of know what the Browns are, and it's kind of a week-to-week matchup thing. And you're right that they've got the schedule is in Cleveland's favor to some degree, but they're learning to become a playoff team. They're learning to take care of their own business. So you look at the Eagles this week and the Jaguars next week, and I felt this way about the Texans, whose record is not really telling of what the Texans are or what they can be. And it's like you got to handle your business against these teams that you're clearly better than. But weather played such a role recently. The Eagles, they've got issues, and Cleveland is the better team. If you can't take care of business, it would tell me a lot. But I think that I trust this club under Kevin Stefanski more than under any coach since their return.
And you mentioned the point. My question was going to be about Kevin Stefanski. What have you seen from him that gives you that confidence? Why is he different, and why is he the right guy finally for the Browns?
I think total steadiness, and it helps. This was evident in the offseason that for the first time, really in decades, you've got a coaching staff and a front office that are working in unison, and there seems to be a lack of ego, in a good sense, where there's accountability. And Stefanski was thrown into with the other group of rookie coaches and every coach into the most chaotic NFL season of our lifetime, and I thought he's handled it, with grace. And on top of it, I would go more micro and look at a game like last week where, it's Monday or Tuesday. You're building your game plan. You have to take a look at the Texans and what they are, but then you take a look at the weather as the week comes in, and you talked about developing a completely second scheme and game plan and approach, which went bigger for the weather, and it worked, and that's that flexibility. There have been an absence of coaches in Cleveland, game day coaches where you trusted what they would do on Sundays. I feel the opposite with Stefanski. And when you have someone like Bill Callahan on your staff, I think that adds so much as well. So no matter what happens this season, on a larger level, you'd have to look at the Browns and say the future is really bright because of the way that the front office works with the coaching staff and the fact that Stefanski just seems to be football obsessed and look at each week as an individual test, and they've come out looking, outside of one or two games, very well prepared, and it looks real different than Cleveland Browns teams of old to me.
Yeah, we feel that way as well, Mark. Mark Sessler, our guest, NFL.com, NFL Network, also co-host of Around the NFL podcast. There's an identity, very clear identity. Now, that identity is those two backs and that offensive line that you mentioned. You mentioned Callahan's impact. You see what Wyatt Teller's impact does coming back. Nick Chubb coming back. Mark, we've only had our starting offensive line. Is it just 2 times, Nathan, completely intact?
It would now be 3 full games. That was the third full game.
Yeah, the 3 times all season. That's been intact. And we were out Chubb for much of the season now already, half the season, and Kareem Hunt was playing injured. So we are just getting to see what this team can be. And from our perspective, as I sit here and look out my window and see snow on the ground, I say, boy, if you're going to build a team here, this is the way you ought to do it. It seems like a good fit for both organization and coach, and it seems like it goes very well together.
It does. And, I can think of 7 other coaches that came in and said, this is Cleveland. We're going to build an AFC North team to go battle other AFC North teams. But you don't see it. The parts aren't there. And there was a Kismet scenario here where I think what Stefanski wants to do on offense, what he wanted to do in Minnesota, and what he's doing here matches really well with the personnel. Cleveland's offensive line from a year ago would not have been able to pull off what they're doing right now. Wyatt Teller is developed into some sort of superhuman over the course of an offseason. That's a positive. And I just think that they are truly built for bad weather and for inclement weather. I think you're right. The test would be, what if they had to go play 3 games in the Dome against a super fast offense and keep up in a shootout? Well, they did keep up in a few shootouts this year too, but it could still be based off your two great running backs. That's what Cleveland is. And I think for people that have been watching the Browns for decades, there's a sense of, yes, this is the team that we remember. There's some DNA linkage to Biner and Mack, days of old. But you have to be more than that in 2020. So there is going to come a time when the passing game will be tested, and it'll be on Baker Mayfield's shoulders, and an offense stripped of Odell Beckham to probably have to keep up in a game or two like that. And I think that that's something this Browns team doesn't shy away from. That's the other thing I think about Stefanski and sort of the messaging is that they're willing to go try and test anything. So there's a level of confidence that I see with this team. It comes forth on certain plays. It comes forth just the way they handle themselves and get themselves out of a jam here and there or rebound from a loss. There's no back-to-back losses this season. That all just kind of tells you that the organization is in a bit of a different place than they've been in the past.
You mentioned no Odell Beckham, and you mentioned that you're going to have some shootouts. You also mentioned how I think part of it was due to the weather, but we won't know if it was only due to the weather that we saw the Texans put 8, sometimes 9 guys in the box. The Browns need to be able to stress the field vertically or at least make a defense think about it. So far, Kaderil Hodge, in the 2 games that he has been back, I think he's run 50 routes, has had 1 pass thrown his way, no catches. Higgins, excellent route runner, savvy route runner, great chemistry with Baker, not a field stretcher. Jarvis, not a field stretcher. Donovan Peoples-Jones has speed, not really a true field stretcher, more of a contested catch guy, and I think has looked pretty good. Where does it come from? The trade deadline has passed. Names like Brashad Perriman were bandied about. Nothing materialized. Taywan Taylor, probably the most qualified guy on the roster, but he has been inactive. He was certainly inactive recently with the weather this past Sunday. Where does that come from, Mark? Because that's the one thing. You can play bully ball all you want, but you need to be able to scare people at times down the field and keep, you can wear them down, and that's fine, but you can't win every game 10-7. So where does that come from for this team? Because you mentioned the personnel. In Minnesota, Stephon Diggs, that's still a vertical offense. They replaced Diggs with Jefferson this year. Kirk Cousins leads the league in downfield passing attempts as a percentage, but the Browns don't have that, and that's the one question I have for you. Where does that come from? How do you manufacture it?
I think you manufacture it, and we've seen it, by getting Baker Mayfield out of the pocket, using the play action. I think that's when Baker's at his best. But the answer may be, because we just talked about all these AFC teams with elements of an Achilles heel, maybe it doesn't come. And maybe that's the fatal flaw and the thing that they have to go work on along with patching the defense up in the offseason. You've lost your most talented wide receiver. You've lost the guy that, along with the running game, everyone had to think about Odell Beckham week after week. I really like Rashard Higgins, and I think that his chemistry with Baker Mayfield is, we've seen it with our eyes. So, maybe it's someone like Rashard Higgins just completely stepping up into that. I don't know if there's really a 1 or 2 wide receiver, but just into that top 2 mix week after week and making plays. It's got to come from guys that you didn't ask it from weeks ago, because you're right, there's no getting new players at this point. And it may be the thing that ultimately sinks them. I don't say that in a totally pessimistic manner. It's just that it's an unknown, and there are offenses around the league right now that are pass-happy, based around the pass, and there's no questions about where it's going to come from. If it's November and you're not sure, that usually doesn't lead somewhere great.
Do you think we'll see over the second half more involvement for Austin Hooper in the passing game? Because you got to have somebody else, and whether that's him down the seam, he's been, and I think, an underappreciated, underrated part of the success. And you mentioned Chubb and Teller back, Hooper being back in the ground game as well. This is a guy who got good money, was a 2-time Pro Bowler, but who was used to running routes and catching, 5-6 balls a game from Matt Ryan. He has not had that role. 1 catch, a big third down this past week. But is he somebody that you think could also be counted on to maybe pick up more slack as a pass catcher?
I think so, because I would say that is one element of the offense that I'm most surprised by, how little he's been involved in the air attack. There are a number of tight ends in Cleveland's roster that can catch the ball. I would rather see more of Austin Hooper and less David Njoku. Harrison Bryant has fulfilled the promise, I think, from his summertime rise. So you got a good group there. It makes sense that someone like Austin Hooper would become a central figure post Odell Beckham in the pass game, and we know he can do it. And he was in a different offense in Atlanta. So maybe it's, the way they talked about deliberately getting the ball to Odell Beckham a little bit earlier in games just to get him cooking. Maybe that's what you do with Austin Hooper. It shouldn't be that hard with the tight end. He and Baker, worked together all off season. So I think that makes sense. It's just that there are fewer targets for defenses to be concerned about. The one thing I think that Hooper's game, his blocking and what he's done in the run game, is something that doesn't show up on the stat sheet, but has been instrumental for them. So he's valuable, but you'd love to see him uptick in the passing game for sure, and soon.
Mark, toughest one for you. You've seen the uniform combinations. Which combination you like the best with the new uniforms?
Honestly, I feel like a happier person because these uniforms are back in our lives. And so there were a couple in the past, and I'm just being real about the 5-year redesign that just would make my eyes bleed to some degree. That's not the case. They're all beautiful now. I would like to see, because when I became a fan, it was right around that 1986-87 window where they went white on white all the time. And just want to see a little bit more of that, maybe mix that in. But I really, week after week, it's one of my favorite things about Cleveland. No matter the result, the best uniforms in football are back.
Mark, I'm not sure that you will see that this year. But as we told people with orange pants, when we told people about orange pants, when they were up in ours, said, be patient. Those came. Just be patient. I think you'll have something that will tickle your fancy in the near future. Maybe not 2020, but maybe
a real nugget.
2021.
I like it.
Appreciate you, Mark. Thanks for your time, bud.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you.
All right, that's Mark Sessler, NFL.com, NFL Network, co-host around the NFL. And a reminder, all guests who appear on Cleveland Browns Daily do so via the Fifth Third Money Line. Fifth Third Bank, making Cleveland Browns Daily a Fifth Third better. Cleveland Browns Daily is also brought to you by our great friends at Snappa, the official tea and juice drink of the Cleveland Browns. It's the first Friday. You can't blame it.
Let's go.
On game day, make sure you head to your nearest discount Drug Mart location before kickoff and load up on your favorite Snapple flavors. You'll hear from Coach from the podium up next. Cleveland Browns Daily, 850 ESPN Cleveland. If you're injured at work, call the Workers' Compensation Lawyers at 1-800-ELK-OHIO for a free case review. Elk & Elk is a proud partner of your Cleveland Browns. Here is Coach Stefanski from Within the Hour.
Looking forward to this week. I think it's a really good football team coming to our building. They're first in the NFC East. We know the challenge they present on offense as they get healthy. They have a bunch of guys coming back off of injuries. I should start with, it's a really well-coached group in total. Doug Peterson does a great job with that group, on offense as with the team, Super Bowl winning coach. On defense, I think it's a really good unit. They really come after you with that front four. Jim Schwartz, again, outstanding. And then special teams, I think it might be the fastest group we play all year. And again, Coach Phipp does a great job with those guys. So it's a really sound scheme on all three sides for the Eagles. So we have to have our work cut out for us, and we really need a great week of preparation, and that starts today. So with that, I'll take any questions.
What do you do special teams wise when you don't have your number one long snapper? I know you have an extra kicker, but what about the long snapper?
Yeah, we have backup long snappers. I have many guys want to be a long snapper, but we have a few guys that already practice it. Mac Wilson being one of them. So we'll just make sure that we have a plan if we're without Charlie.
And that includes Sunday. I mean, the goal would be, I guess, to have him back. But if you don't, would you have to bring somebody in or go with somebody you already have?
No, we have guys on the roster that can do it.
Hey, Kevin, I'm curious about Hubbard and Janovich. According to the rules, if they were asymptomatic, they could have been back by now. What is their status?
I don't think that's true, Tony. I think if you test positive, it's, I believe, 10 days.
Oh, even without symptoms? Yeah. Okay. All right. With that in mind, then, your plans at fullback, you have one on the practice squad, or might we see Chubb and Hunt together?
Yeah, I think we talk about all those things, Tony. Without Andy, we've got to look at the tight end room. You got to look potentially at elevating Johnny Stanton. You look at using a halfback there. So those are things that we're talking about doing.
Hey, Kevin, with Jack Conklin, kind of uncertain right now, and Chris Hubbard, is Kendall Lamb your right tackle?
Yes.
And with Miles, with all these, recent COVID list additions, have you guys ruled out any COVID-related issues for him, or what exactly is going on there?
Well, I mean, with 2020, I don't think you rule out anything, but
yeah.
Obviously he's not going on the COVID list. So he's sick, and we'll make sure that we, again, follow all the protocols.
This is like Odell, maybe like a month ago, what you had to go through with him?
Yeah, similar, how it is if guys are sick. It's not like the old days where you say, all right, come on in later in the day. You can't do that.
Yeah, it seems like Carson Wentz is struggling.
2 minutes.
And a lot of interceptions, and those guys are coming off a little bit of a rough game. Can you just, what are you seeing on film from Carson, and what does he bring?
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for Carson Wentz. I think he's an outstanding football player. They're getting healthy now, which I think plays into the entire offense's ability to be efficient and score points. But he's someone, I've seen it with my own eyes. That kid can make every play with his feet, with his arms. So he definitely has our attention.
When you look 10 weeks into the season at Baker Mayfield, what's one significant area of growth that you can point to?
I think just overall comfort level in what we're asking him to do. I think I wouldn't use the offseason as an excuse. I would only tell you that a lot of the reps that you learn and teach off of occur in the spring and in the summer. So a lot of the reps that he's learning from are occurring in training camp.
1 minute.
Games without that preseason. So that's unique, but that's not unique to the Browns. That's everybody. So I think just maximizing all of those reps that he's been getting throughout this season.
All right, and the last one, when you look at the Eagles pass rush, they were particularly difficult on Joe Burrow. They are difficult on many a quarterback. Is there anything they do that is very specific to them or unusual, unlike anything you've seen thus far?
They are so aggressive. They pin their ears back, and they're
30
off the ball, defeating one-on-one blocks, just across the board, obviously with Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham, but it's really they come in waves. I think they do a great job of getting off the ball and are extremely aggressive in the rush.
On that last run by Nick, how was he able to get around the corner? It looked like kind of the Texans.
10 seconds, stand by.
Yeah, Nick made a great individual effort. They had an unblocked player right there, and he did something that not many people on this earth.
You're up.
Yes, he did. And nominations for your 2020 Helmets program are now being accepted. Zenith invites you to nominate your Ohio high school to receive $25,000 worth of new Zenith helmets. Visit promotions.clevelandbrowns.com to learn more. We go behind enemy lines. Our buddy Dave Spadaro joining us coming up next. You're listening to Cleveland Browns Daily on 850 ESPN Cleveland. All right, time to go behind enemy lines with our good buddy Dave Spadaro, host of the Eagles Insider podcast and the source for everything Eagles. He joins on the Fifth Third Money Line. Dave, thanks so much for taking the time. And let's just start with the most recent time we saw this team, because going into that game against the Giants, boy, I from our vantage point, you say this is the chance for the Eagles to grab that division by the throat, and it didn't happen. What went wrong last week?
Well, interestingly enough, that was also my vantage point, and so the Eagles did not claim superiority in the NFC East because they stunk on third downs. They were 0 of 9 on third downs. First time since 2004 that the Eagles failed to convert on a third down opportunity. They started very slowly on defense. They were prepared for Daniel Jones and that option run game, and they still didn't stop it. 2 drives, 2 touchdowns. Giants go up 14-3. Eagles lacking offensive firepower to come back. And even when they got in to the end zone, 14-11, early third quarter, the defense gave up a touchdown drive immediately thereafter. So it's been that kind of season. Fits and starts. They look good at times. But honestly, for the most part this year, they've been playing from behind. And they've been able to pull out a couple of wins, one against the Giants, one against the Cowboys. Nearly pulled off one in Pittsburgh, nearly beat the Baltimore Ravens. But they're 3-5-1 for a reason, and They just have not been able to play complementary football. The offense and defense certainly not complementing each other. They've gotten really nothing big out of the special teams this year. It's been incredibly frustrating in Philadelphia.
Dave, it's great to talk to you again, and was just wondering, when you look at this team, you look at what Miles Sanders has done, something that hasn't happened in the NFL since 2010, 3 straight games with 80 or more rushing yards on 15 or fewer carries. The Eagles are throwing the ball the third most in the league as a percentage of plays. Why aren't they leaning on Miles Sanders and maybe taking a page out of the Browns playbook and saying, let's just run this thing? I mean, last week you had Sanders ran well, so did Boston Scott, but it doesn't seem like they're focused on running the football, and he might be their most effective weapon on offense.
Yeah, and he was hurt for the couple of games in the middle of the season, middle of the first half of the season. So, and then behind him, they've got smaller running backs. I mean, the Browns have 2 powerful running backs. The Eagles have Miles Sanders, and they have Boston Scott, who's the size of Darren Sproles. And then plus that's one thing. But the philosophy here is to throw the football. I mean, it's been like that since Andy Reid was here. You throw early, you get a lead, you run the football, you take control of the clock. Eagles, when you don't play with a lead, very difficult to win games 17-14. So, yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying. That's just not the philosophy here. Miles hasn't been healthy. The offensive line has been in tatters because of injuries. They're now getting healthy. They'll have left guard Isaac Seumalo back, so they'll have a reasonable facsimile of the line that they felt they would have in place way back when. But, look, they've lost right guard Brandon Brooks. They're all pro. He was gone in the spring with an Achilles tendon tear. Their left tackle, Andre Dillard, their first-round draft pick in 2019, biceps tear in August. So, they haven't been able to put it together up front. They haven't been able to put it together in the running game, at least to the point where they're scoring effectively and controlling the clock. And they're not playing with leads. And when you don't play with the lead, as you guys have found out in Cleveland, just a game or two, right? When you don't play with the lead, it's really hard to dominate with the run game.
Dave, the one thing you talk about the pass game, and that's what the Eagles are. That's such a big part of their identity. You look at what Wentz has done this year, and you see a guy who only 3 times this year has cracked the 60% completion percentage in a game and lives, it seems, in the mid-50s, and acknowledging that they have had, as you've just articulated, incredible injuries on the offensive line. In the last 2 years, injuries at the receiver positions, and they do seem to be getting a little healthier on the outside. Where is Wentz now? What is he now as a player in terms of what you can count on every single Sunday?
So when you were thinking about the Eagles and the Giants prior to this phone call, I was thinking Eagles and the Browns the last time the teams met. Carson Wentz makes his debut. Doug Peterson makes his debut as the head coach. A new era in Philadelphia Eagles football, and it was very exciting. And Carson was dominant through the 2017 season until he suffered the knee injury, and then he had a back injury. And then last year he put it together for the final 4 games. Eagles sweep the division, win the NFC East, and he gets hurt 9 plays into the playoff game against Seattle. And he's come back with this bizarre decision-making at times. I mean, stuff that he has never done in his career, where he threw 7 interceptions in each of the last 3 seasons. He had 12 through 8 games this year. 4 fumbles, holding on to the football too long with the opportunity trying to get guys open downfield, not throwing with anticipation. So he's not the same quarterback, at least certainly from a production standpoint. That's really all that matters. And I can't tell you why. That is the $300 million question in Philadelphia. What is happening with Carson Wentz? What can you believe in from him from week to week? Because this season, he's really been at his best in frenetic, late-game situations, Eagles running, no huddle, a little bit of schoolyard football. He's great in those environments. And they tried to do that last week against the Giants, a lot of no huddle. But they had an early drive. They then kill themselves with penalties, with mistakes, with bad snaps, with drop balls. I mean, that's just what teams in the NFL, that everybody says, well, we're just a couple of plays away. Well, every team's a couple of plays away. And the teams that win are the teams that make those plays. The teams that don't win, that don't make those plays, they're the ones who are talking about being a couple plays away. So it's been very maddening with Carson Wentz in 2020.
One of the things, though, that he loves are those two tight end sets that the Eagles were really forced into 2 years ago, or last season, I'm sorry, with all the injuries to wide receiver. Ertz has been activated. Goddard finally back rounding into form. Richard Rodgers has given you guys some nice minutes while Ertz is out. But do you expect Zach Ertz to be back for the Browns game? And should that maybe kind of help this offense to get he and Goddard back on the field as they were early in the season?
I think there's hope that Zach will be back. He's practicing today. We'll see how he responds. When he does come back, I certainly think that he and Dallas Goedert together will make a difference. Good matchups for them. A comfort level with Zach Ertz. I mean, the guy's a Pro Bowl player. So, and he and Carson are very much on the same page. But even before Zach was injured this year, there was just a bit of disconnect with Zach and with Carson. And that's what it's been like for the Eagles this entire season. There's just a little something off. And then you look up, and the Eagles have scored 17 points. And so, at one point, kind of late in that first half of the season, they were starting to roll a little bit. Good offensive production at Pittsburgh, decent offensive production against the Ravens, great fourth quarter late against the Giants, scratched out an ugly win against Dallas. That's just the kind of season it's been. So will Zach help? Yes. But what would really help, guys, is for the Eagles to get some chunk plays. And they thought last year when they brought in Deshaun Jackson that he would bring that explosive vertical element. Well, he hasn't been healthy. Alshon Jeffrey's been hurt. They used the first-round draft pick on Jalen Reagor, and he's been okay, but he's been hurt as well. So they really just haven't been able to push the ball down the field as effectively as they want. And, they've started drives with terrible field position, so they have to use an old phrase, matriculate the ball up the field, and that's painstaking to watch. It's difficult to put together 11-play, 74-yard drives time after time after time. You need gash plays. Eagles just have not been able to get them. So to answer your question, they're hopeful with Zach Ertz, and yes, when he comes back, he will make this offense better. How much better? Well, we'll see.
Talking with Dave Spadaro, Eagles insider. And Dave, you're right. Eagles 26th in big plays a game. Browns defense 3rd in big plays per game allowed, so this might be a tough one. Let's flip it to the other side, though. This Eagles defense, 11th in total, 6th in passing, 10th on third downs, tied for 2nd in sacks. So they're very good there. Where they have struggled, though, is the run defense. What has been the issue? They're 26th against the run. You're going to see a lot of runs from the Cleveland Browns. What's been the problem for the Eagles with their run defense this year?
Yeah, again, bizarre, because they've done a decent job against running backs. Ezekiel Elliott had 63 yards. Darrell Henderson from the Rams, 81 yards, most by a running back against the Eagles this season. Where they've been hurt is the quarterbacks who are mobile. Lamar Jackson over 100 yards. Daniel Jones, 2 big games against the Eagles. Misdirection plays. Steelers kill them on misdirection plays. Ray Cloud, a couple of big runs. Brandon Ayuk in San Francisco, touchdown run. So their misdirection has really hurt them. They have been terrible in the red zone. They're among the worst teams in the league in the red zone. If the defensive line, which they have invested in heavily, Javon Hargrave, their big free agent signing from the Steelers, has been hurt early, playing a bit better lately, but not the impact game-changing player. They thought that with Hargrave, with Fletcher Cox, with Malik Jackson, that they would collapse offensive lines from the inside out and then let their speed rushers come off the edge and make it happen. And that just hasn't happened because they haven't stopped the run effectively. So, it's been difficult. Like the Eagles last year gave up, I think it was the number's 88 yards per game on the ground. This year it's 130. So that's a big difference. And a lot of it's come from opposing quarterbacks. A lot of it's come from misdirection. And then some of it's come on 3rd and short where offenses are able to use their running backs to pound and keep drives alive. And the Eagles know very well that what they're going to see on Sunday with the Cleveland Browns is something entirely different than what they've seen this year. 2 backs with power, commitment to running the football. They're going to challenge the Eagles' physical nature. The Eagles are not particularly big on defense. So we will see the Eagles if they stand up and shut down, Hunt and Chubb, which really very few teams do.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Dave, you're the best.
The best. I was going to say 11 runs of 20 yards or more against this Eagles D. 6 by quarterbacks, 2 by receivers, only 3 by running backs, as Dave pointed out.
It's crazy. It is a crazy, bizarre. I mean, look, it's 2020, so we expect something.
Everything's crazy.
But I mean, like the Eagles, this is just not the script that the Eagles had laid out prior to the season. But here they are, 3-5-1. By the way, guys, in first place in the NFC East. So I'm not sure what that means, other than as bad as the Eagles have been, they still control their own destiny here the rest of the season. And a win on Sunday in Cleveland will be very difficult to attain, but it would go a long way to establishing the Eagles as the favorites in this division.
Dave, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it a great deal.
My pleasure, guys. Stay safe.
All right, and Dave joined on the Fifth Third Money Line. And a reminder that all guests who appear on Cleveland Browns Daily do so on the Fifth Third Money Line, Fifth Third Bank, making Cleveland Browns Daily a Fifth Third better. Let's talk about your mattress that may be to blame for a bad night's sleep, back pain, or discomfort. If you've gone mattress shopping at traditional furniture stores, you've seen those outrageous prices. At Northeast Factory Direct, they've gotten rid of all of those extras. You get the same quality mattress. It's a fraction of the cost, guys. Alex partnered with a manufacturer here in the United States that makes mattresses exclusively for Northeast Factory Direct. I'm telling you, anything mattress related, they've got you covered. Pillow top, memory foam, gel foam, all the sizes. And the best part is they've got a ton of mattresses in stock right now, and they're ready to deliver them to you. You can get them right away and get a better night's sleep right away. Check them out. West 140th Street in Cleveland, Lakeland Boulevard in Euclid, or Freeway Drive in Macedonia. You can also shop them online anytime at northeastfactorydirect.com. You listen to Cleveland Browns Daily on 850 ESPN Cleveland. And Beau Bishop here for my great friends at Raising Cane's, and they're bringing you even more delicious hand-battered, cooked-to-order chicken fingers, cane sauce, crispy crinkle-cut fries, coleslaw, buttery Texas toast, sweet tea, and lemonade. It's coming your way. Another new location, this one in Middleburg Heights. It's opening soon. Be on the lookout. Raising Cane's, your home for game day goodies. Raising Cane's Chicken Fingers, proud sponsor of the Ohio High School Association and Ohio State Athletics as well. Raising Cane's Chicken Fingers, one love. Just resetting the big story of the day, of course, for us, and that is the additional names added to the COVID-19 list. Jack Conklin, Charlie Hewitt, and Cody Parkey on the reserve COVID-19 list this morning. Myles Garrett is feeling well. He's at home, not here today, but not in that or on that list. So an important distinction there, and of course very similar, who knows in terms of why he's home in terms of the illness, but similar to what happened with Odell Beckham Jr. And Z, you have some clarification just on when guys can come back, provided all the benchmarks are cleared.
Right. So remember in the first hour, and if you're just joining us, if you test positive, you will go on the COVID list for a minimum of 10 days. Now, if you receive 2 negatives within the first 5 days, you are then able to come off of that list. So that would apply to Chris Hubbard and Andy Janovich based on the information that was what we know about them. As it relates to the close contacts, which are, as you mentioned, Conklin, Charlie Hewlett, and the kicker Cody Parkey, they were close contacts to a non-staff member who tested positive. If they can have 2 consecutive negative tests for 6 days from the time of last contact with that positive member, they are able to play. They're able to come off the list and play. I was told by a Brown spokesperson that it is in fact true that the 6-day window would allow them to play this Sunday against the Eagles. So that last contact was more than 6 days prior to the game on Sunday. So if they continue to test negative between now and then, they will come off the list and be ready to go on Sunday for Conklin, for Hewlett, and for Cody Parkey. Chris Hubbard, likely 10 days. Andy Janovich, likely 10 days before they are eligible to return from the COVID list. And that's if asymptomatic. If they are symptomatic, it's a minimum of 10 days and then 5 days, but need to be 5 days out from their most recent day of symptoms.
Okay, so some clarification on that front. And in terms of where we go from a roster standpoint, Z, Conklin are obviously now in, and you hope for Sunday, obviously, with him. But also remember that we're down Hub as well from last week, and so that would that creates an interesting spot. And Kendall Lamb would be the guy that would be in that role. And then what's the depth beyond that?
Yeah, so Kendall Lamb would be the one that would immediately step in to your lineup at right tackle, and Lamb's a guy who has started, multiple games in his career. 2 years ago, 13 starts for the Houston Texans. Last year started 2 games for the Browns as well. And so this is somebody who has played a lot. And for his career, let's see, that's 11, 24, 26 career starts in the National Football League for Kendall Lamb. So a veteran with experience. The issue becomes what would happen in a game were something to happen to either one of those guys. Now it gets pretty dicey. The only other tackle on your roster, the only one, is Taylor on the practice squad. Alex Taylor, who is a rookie, who's 6'8", 301, a transit guy who played hoops out of South Carolina State. So very much a project. Now, could you end up kicking out, say, a Joel Bitonio from guard to tackle? Perhaps. We went down that road years ago. I don't know that it's a road that you want to go down again, but those are your options. Now, will the team, is there somebody that they can bring in? Again, I don't know the answer to that, but right now, that's what you're dealing with. Last week, they brought up Michael Dunn to the active roster when Hub was out. He is in his first year. He has appeared in one game, which was last week. He didn't play in the game, but was on the active roster for one game. Out of Maryland, 26 years of age, 6'5", 307. I don't know if he has guard tackle versatility or not, but what I'm saying is you have right now Bitonio, Teller, Lamb, Wills on the 53. That's it. Hubbard was your swing guy. Nick Harris now you obviously have, and maybe you kick Bitonio out and put Nick Harris and move him. I don't know what would end up ultimately happening. But on the offensive line, as it stands right now, you've got your starting 5, which would put Lamb in for Conklin. Now, hopefully you get Conklin back. Then you've got Nick Harris, and that's it for the active roster. Nick Harris, that's it, and Lamb. Your guards are just that. So you have Dunn and Taylor on the practice squad. That's it. So an injury in this game would be
a big problem.
Huge. So you need to go. Look, you get Conklin back. At least you have Lamb, and at least you have Nick Harris and Dunn. Then you feel like you have backups everywhere along the line if Conklin's back. So the hope for the Browns clearly is that Conklin, Hewlett, and Parkey continue to test negative, and then they will be able to play. But if not, you are thin, real thin on the line.
Are you surprised, and my guess is we'll see more of this, but are you somewhat surprised, considering where we are right now, that we have only had a couple of disruptions in this NFL season? It's really remarkable to me. And I think, obviously, promised more to come, but we really have only had the Titans that we've had to juggle around. Everything else we've been able to play within the game week.
It is because, in my opinion, the NFL made a decision, I would say, after kind of that first month of the season, that we're playing through this. And we're going to come up with these intensive protocols. We're going to minimize the spread. But early in the season, positive tests seemed like they put games in jeopardy. Even one, remember?
Yeah, even one. Oh, for sure.
So it's been I would call it a paradigm shift in terms of what is acceptable to continue to still play, from better understanding, better protocols being in place. So I don't know that we will see another disruption, because I was reading the report from Dr. Sills, the head for the NFL, who's kind of overseeing all of this, and they believe that these things are not happening. First of all, there's been 0.0 evidence of in-game transmission from one team to another. There's also been 0 evidence of in-game transmission from one teammate to another.
Right.
They believe that these incidents that are popping up around the league are popping up as a result of the community outside of the NFL bubble that people are coming in contact with, because, look, you need to come into contact with people in your lives. So the NFL is kind of just at the point where they know what it is. They know how they have to deal with it, how they will deal with it. And I think from the Browns standpoint now, this is the first time that you have, obviously dealt with something that we would call a challenge. And we'll see how this team handles it and proceeds with it going forward.
Yeah, absolutely so. If you're looking to refinance or purchase a home, Union Home Mortgage, the process is simple and straightforward. The loan officer keeps you in the loop all the way to the end zone. Visit unionhomemortgage.com to get a mortgage you'll rave about. Union Home Mortgage. Promises kept. Union Home Mortgage Corp. NMLS 2229 is an equal housing lender. The legendary Bernie Kosar up next. You listen to Cleveland Browns Daily on 850 ESPN Cleveland. Obsessing over something like football can certainly be a problem, but if you're obsessing over gambling, it can be dangerous. So do something to take your mind off it, like finding a hobby. If you want more tips like this, you can go to keepitfunohio.com for great ways to keep gambling fun. With that, we head out on the Fifth Third Money Line and visit with our great friend, the legendary Bernie Kosar. And I got to tell you, buddy, these are tough times. The news is tough. It's all tough. And then I get on social media this morning, and I see you on a four-wheeler with your Browns helmet on, and I just go, that's a man who's winning at life. So thank you for that this morning. I thank you.
Yeah. Bo, we had to bring a little levity and lightness to our day, and I actually woke up thinking of you, knowing how much you like those videos. So knowing I'm going to be joining you today, that was in the spirit of the great Beau Bishop.
Yes, I love him.
What a moment.
It seems like you're having the best time ever. Where is that your helmet, sir? Is that your original game helmet from back from when you played here? Is it one that you've kept this whole time?
Wow, that's an amazing question, and it's how life goes full circle. And this is not just for radio to sound like I'm embellishing this, but that was actually the helmet that came back to me about a year ago, and that was my rookie helmet that I wore for the Cleveland Browns in 1985.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did it come back to you? How did it find its way home?
I think Brian Brennan stole it from the team at the end of the season, put it into his charity, and a good friend of mine bought it and returned it back to me. And it just showed up about 18 months ago. I'm absolutely honored to have it back. And I thank Brian Brennan for sneaking it out of the locker room. Thank you, BB.
What a great story. And the video is it's pure joy. It's what we all want from life. We just all want to be out there happy, and the helmet looks spectacular. And Bernie, we're all feeling good too, because in this case, when we get together, it's a victory Wednesday. The Browns wasn't pretty. The conditions were treacherous. I can attest to that as someone who was in them. But the Browns got it done. What did you take away from the Browns win over this Texans team?
You know, the main thing when you start getting at this point in the season is just getting that W. So getting to 6-3 was the main point of it. And I love the way we're learning and growing as a team and an organization. You know, we had that miserable conditions, obviously, again, this past weekend in terms of the weather, just like the Las Vegas Raiders game 2 weeks before. And in that game, we at times maybe didn't have the complementary football that we would have liked. Boy, we had really learned. And by the Texans game and how we played this past Sunday in terms of sticking with the offense, defense, and special teams and complementary playing together and physically imposing our will from the offensive line and defensive line, thankful to have Wyatt Teller back in there, made for a beautiful way to get our sixth win of the year.
Bernie, a big part of the win, obviously, was the two-headed rushing attack, and it's one unlike that there is else in the league. Nobody else has the opportunity to have, I think, two of the top seven backs. We just happen to have two of them in the whole league. You played with Biner and Mack, and oftentimes when we talk about running backs, you hear them say the hot hand or who's feeling it. When you were quarterbacking those teams and you had those two guys, could you tell who had it and who didn't? Because I think Kevin Stefanski's done a miraculous job of being able to ride them and keep the hot guy with it. But it's something that takes some juggling. How did you do it in your time?
Well, that's a great point. You know, in 1985, to have Kevin Mack and Ernest Biner both rushing for over 1,000 yards, and then to see, after basically 9 games, although Nick Chubb was hurt, to see Kareem Hunt with 633 yards, averaging 4.7 yards a carry. Nick Chubb with 461 yards, averaging 6.1 yards a carry. When both of those guys are running like that, just like I felt when Ernest Biner and Kevin Mack were running, play calling, and not to take anything away from the awesome play calling of Coach Stefanski, but when both of those backs are able to run like that, it makes play calling that much easier. And they almost feed off each other. And when you see the backs running like that, you see the offensive line finishing their blocks downfield. You see the receivers getting more involved on the second and third levels of the run game down the field. You see the big chunk plays materialize like have been happening for the Browns this year.
Bernie, as this ground game was spectacular in this one, The quarterback, though, still had to make some plays. On that 3rd and 18, I think one of the most important plays of the game, it was Baker to Hollywood Higgins. They had him kind of bracketed high-low. He went over the front defender, in front of the back defender. Just a big-time throw. And if I took one play away from it that encouraged me, it was that one. What did you see from Baker in these adverse conditions, especially on that critical play? 3rd down. They called the money down for a reason, Bernie.
The money down for a fantastic reason, probably the top-tier throw of the day by both quarterbacks. And again, not another week, I'm not trying to be a quarterback apologist, but being 12 for 20 for 132 yards, it doesn't seem like an NFL-caliber excellent game. But making big plays when they matter, moving the sticks like that play to Hollywood Higgins to get the first down, to really close out a victory for us. It's imperative you do that. And the weather we've had the last 2 weeks makes it almost impossible, like we keep pointing out, for quarterbacks to be successful throwing the ball. So as long as our quarterback is throwing and playing at a level higher than the opposing team's quarterback, I love our chances of continuing to get these W's.
Bernie, can you take us through, and I'll give you 2 examples. The one throw from Baker to Jarvis, it's like it got caught in a wind tunnel and just took off on him down the field. There's another one that Deshaun threw where it looked like the ball hit a wall and it just fell to the ground. For fans out there, understanding, take us in the mind of a quarterback physically. How do you explain what happens with the wind at our stadium, and what is the best way that you can throw in that environment?
Well, now that I'm retired, I prefer to somewhat give some of the secrets away, like the great Phil Dawson and me used to talk through the wind in the stadiums. But that's typically a weapon for us, and that's something that opposing quarterbacks should have massive issues with. And typically, for the fans out there, if you see which way the flags are blowing at the stadium, rest assured that is absolutely not happening on the field. And on the field, they tend to be opposite of the flagpoles at the top of the stadium. Yet, as you get to the crossbar and to the top of goalpost, there's another wind pattern there, which is your intermediate throws for quarterbacks, like those 25 to 35 yards square and short post throws on the field. But there's another level of wind above the crossbars or above the goalpost that the kickers and us quarterbacks deal with on the deep throws that actually goes back again with the wind. So there's really 3 tiers to that.
Yeah, it was stunning.
And I don't like to really give – we really don't like to give us home QBs don't really like to give that info up to the opposing QBs.
Honestly, Bernie, I don't know if anyone would even believe it. I mean, you just said there's 3 wind patterns.
I'm on the field. You have the West End flags. The West End flags are blowing directly to the dog pound. The dog pound flag is kind of blowing more across the field at the home sideline, and I'm standing on the home sideline, and it is 100% downwind away from the dog pound into the west end of the stadium. I mean, gusting downwind, and yet all the flags on the west end would indicate it was going east. Total madness.
Yeah, Nathan, where you're standing for the games is absolutely atrocious in terms of anybody trying to figure out those wins, just like you're trying to articulate it now. It's absolutely a mess. And for us as QBs, there's of course a massive physical presence that's needed and challenged when you're playing NFL quarterback on a Sunday afternoon. But the mental stress and the mental really math and algorithms that you have to go through and play off of in terms of wind and your offensive plays and field position and exactly where you are in body alignment to actually execute a play that hasn't a chance from a physics standpoint to get its way and drive itself through the wind is incredibly stressful for not only the 3 hours of the game, but the couple hours before the game, trying to figure out what the heck you're going to do to win that game between 1 and 4 o'clock.
So, Bernie, last week we talked a lot about having a cornerback follow sides, etc. And I'm sure you caught this with your very astute eye. The Browns, for the first time all year, they were rotating Denzel and Money Mitch on their sides of the field. Now, it was not to follow Will Fuller. There really, in fact, didn't necessarily seem to be a particular rhyme or reason to it that I could decipher. I will defer to you if you did, because they would often break the huddle before the Texans did, but they were flip-flopping. And I would say Denzel spent, about 40% of the game at right cornerback when he had played exclusively left cornerback through the first 8 games of the season. I can only imagine that came as a result of self-scouting. And what I was wondering is, as a quarterback, you said if he follows a specific receiver, that gives you a lot of tells about coverage. Now, we talked about the variations that you can do and whether it's man or if you're playing cover 3, and it can still look the same depending on how you line up in terms of your techniques. But to just kind of have them go back and forth throughout the game, and even in a certain drive, they would switch depending on the plays. It was that more to just so that the quarterback couldn't say, all right, I always know Denzel's playing left cornerback, so the right's my initial read's going to always be left? Was it just to kind of, they may have called plays thinking he'd be left, and now all of a sudden he's right, and it could affect what they were trying to do from an offense? Why did that happen, and what impact does it have on the quarterback?
Well, for the listeners out there, Nathan just gave a coaching level articulation of outstanding defense and defensive strategy to really throw us quarterbacks off. And Nathan, you brought it up perfectly last week and again this week. That subtle change that we talked about last week actually became more of a drastic change for us in terms of just what Nathan pointed out in terms of Denzel Ward just didn't follow Fuller around. Coach Woods implemented a defensive strategy that, yes, he was on Fuller a decent percentage of the time during the game, but playing at right cornerback and left cornerback, and then with motion sometimes being in the slot, that absolutely threw Houston Texans' game plans and tendencies off base, and Deshaun Watson's pre-snap abilities to understand and get a pre-snap read of what the coverage is going to be at the snap absolutely caused some confusion and added to the major issues that the weather caused and the major issues that our defensive front was causing for the undermanned Houston Texans offensive line. That just made for a perfect strategy defense by Coach Woods to shut down Houston.
Bernie, you're the best, man. Appreciate you as always, my friend. We'll talk to you again next week.
Sounds great. You matter. Go Browns.
Go Browns.
That's exactly true. Reminder, all guests who appear on Cleveland Browns Daily do so via the Fifth Third Money Line, Fifth Third Bank, making Cleveland Browns Daily a Fifth Third better.
Just to put a quick number on what I had talked about. So in Week 7 against Cincinnati, 72 snaps outside at cornerback, 71 of them at left corner, 1 at right corner. Week 8 against the Raiders, 51 snaps for Denzel Ward, all 51 at left corner. Week 10 against Houston, 32 at left corner, 19 at right corner. He's played 22 snaps all season at right cornerback. 19 of them happened this week. That was clearly a shift in strategy from Joe Woods.
Yes, indeed it was. From one legend to another, the great Sal Paolantonio going to join us coming up next. You listen to Cleveland Browns Daily on 850 ESPN Cleveland. In 1946, the Browns were born. For generations, witnessed great hits, great runs, have enjoyed game days with legends. Renew your 2021 membership to be part of our 75th anniversary celebration. Visit memberships.clevelandbrowns.com or call your rep today. And with that, we head out on the Fifth Third money line once again. And again, a legend greets us. It is the great Sal Paolantonio, ESPN national correspondent and the host of the smartest football show that there is, NFL Matchup, with Greg Kosar and Matt Bowen as well. Sal, thank you so much for taking the time for us today, sir, and it's appropriate, obviously, with the Eagles coming to town here on Sunday and a Philadelphia team that you thought had a lot of momentum and then just hit a brick wall last week against the Giants. What do you make of this Eagles team that we're going to see on Sunday?
You know, I think they're dysfunctional offensively. I went back and I looked at that game. I covered the game, obviously, and I've covered a lot of their games over the years. But that's a team right now that is dysfunctional at the quarterback position. I think it falls on Carson Wentz. It has to. Your number one job of your quarterback is to move the chains and get your team into the end zone. He was 0 for 6 on third down. The team was 0 for 9 on third down. I went back and I looked at every third down play. He had a 3rd and 1, a 3rd and 3, and a 3rd and 1 right in a row at the start, and then he got into some 3rd and longs. And he just didn't see open receivers, gentlemen. I mean, there were opportunities for him to hit open receivers, and he was reckless with the football, threw it into double teams. He's just not seeing the field. He's not very accurate right now. He doesn't have much confidence.
And I'm just quick follow-up on that, Sal, because it's interesting, and we've had some of that. What you're describing with Baker happened, at times last year, and we feel like we're coming out of that. But we've had that as well, and you wonder, well, what leads to that? Is it confidence? Is it trying to overcompensate? Is it mental? Obviously, you have great contacts in Philly. What's at the root of this with Wentz? Because obviously he's been elite.
He was elite 1 year, the Eagles' Super Bowl year. He was elite at the end of last year with some spare parts and willed the team into the playoffs. But, he hasn't been consistently elite for sure. And I wouldn't even use the word elite, actually, in describing him. I would say he had one MVP stretch of 11 games. That does not make a career. Last year he had 4 games. And I'm not trying to be down on Carson Wentz. I'm just trying to point out to your audience the facts. And the facts are, he's been often hurt, often unavailable, been criticized for a lot of different reasons, and not the least of which is he just has not been very accurate at all. You look at the next-gen stats, and I know you guys look at these stats because we all get them at ESPN. He has the worst completion rate to open receivers in the National Football League. I mean, we're talking about worse than Sam Darnold. We're talking about worse than Drew Lock. So this is a guy who's just not playing very well, and I think, and I've said this here in Philadelphia, I think he's on the clock. I think he's got 7 games to turn it around.
He is, and you look at around the league, for example, completion percentages are up. You have people around 70. A lot of quarterbacks are in the high 60s. He's in the 50s. And you talked about some of the issues that he has had, and then I realize Miles Sanders has missed time, but it seems to me when Miles Sanders is on the field, they should maybe base this offense around him, and yet Doug Peterson clearly has been reluctant to do so. Why do you think that is?
Well, listen, I think it's actually a little bit more detailed. Your analysis is right on, but let's take it to the next step, okay? Last week, they played the Giants. They have a guy named Boston who plays for Philly, who kills New York. Boston Scott kills the Giants, kills them in the last 2 games. Scored the game-winning touchdown on Thursday Night Football. Had 3 touchdowns when they clinched the division at MetLife Stadium last year. He kills them. He had 4 touches in the game on Sunday. That's inexplicable. That's inexcusable. That's coaching malfeasance. That's terrible. Now, I realize it was Miles Sanders' first game back. He's your guy. You want to incorporate him into the offense, but you want to win a football game. That's the most important thing. And you got to be smarter than that. Boston Scott should have had 20 touches in the game. 20. And he didn't. And I look at this particular matchup. Let's fast forward it to this matchup, as Greg Kosar likes to say on our show. By the way, thank you for publicizing and promoting our show. And it is the smartest.
It's the best.
It's the smartest show because of Matt Bowen and Greg Cosell. My job is just to steer them in the right direction. As Greg Cosell likes to say, let's fast forward this to the next matchup against the Cleveland Browns. So what can you hope to do offensively against Cleveland? I think Cleveland has 3 of the best players in the NFL in Chubb, Hunt, and Garrett. I mean, literally.
Yeah.
I mean, if I was starting a team and I had to go like top 25, they would all get the top 25. So you know they're going to get after Carson. The Eagles' offensive line has been decimated, have 10 different offensive line combinations. So you know they're going to come after that O-line. You know they're going to blitz. You got one of the best pass rushers. You just hit the nail on the head. You better run the ball in this game. You better run the ball. You better use screens and misdirections and run the ball and jet sweeps and reverses and all kinds of stuff to keep Myles Garrett from crawling all over Carson Wentz. Am I wrong about that or not?
No, not at all. And yet the Eagles have thrown it 64% of the time, 3rd highest in the NFL.
Insane.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a tough – Sal, just from our perspective, taking a look at this Browns team, because the one thing that, we've obviously had a lot of coaches. You can't hide from it. Had a lot of coaches over the years. But the hiring of Kevin Stefanski in partnership with the marriage of Andrew Berry and stability has come. And what we see on a week-in, week-out basis, and acknowledging it's not perfect, and acknowledging that when we get behind, we haven't been able to chase games yet and be able to do that. But we do have an identity, and it's to run the ball with those 2 incredibly talented backs that you've mentioned, and with an offensive line that's becoming one of the best in the league. When you see what Kevin Stefanski has done here in terms of its sustainability, in terms of it being excellent for a long time, what do you see?
I think the correct word that you used, and I think it's totally appropriate, is stability. That's, to me, what I see. And the way Stefanski is coaching the team and the way he is calling the offense is that he is not looking for consistency in his philosophy or his approach. He's just trying to use contingency to make the best of what's available. So, in my view, in the last 3 or 4 games, Baker Mayfield has maybe had 1.5 good games, right? Am I wrong about that? I don't think I'm wrong about that. I would say he's had about, 5 or 6 quarters where he's looked really good and the rest of it where he's really struggled. So, Stefanski has gone back to the run game, and that's what I think he has to do in this particular game. The Giants ran up and down the field on Jim Schwartz's offense. I mean, the Eagles have so much money tied up in defensive tackles. They have more money tied up in defensive tackles than the gross domestic product of most Caribbean nations. It's ridiculous.
What's interesting, though,
and they couldn't stop the run.
When you look at their run defense, is that running backs have had a kind of a tough sledding against them. 3.3 yards per carry, 79 yards a game.
That's very deceiving. That number is deceiving. Yeah. And quarterbacks and wide receivers, look at their numbers running against the Eagles defense.
Right, but for the Browns, we don't have a quarterback who's going to run like a Daniel Jones or a Lamar Jackson. We run the ball exclusively with our running backs. You feel good about that matchup, though, for the Browns, even though the Eagles have done well against backs so far this season?
Gallman did pretty well against them last week on Sunday. I mean, I thought he was an important highlight. I mean, he kept the offense on schedule. Dallas couldn't run because their offensive line has been decimated.
Yeah.
They ran a little bit in the game, but not a lot. Washington ran the ball against them. Antonio Gibson looked good against them. So, I mean, you have to pick and choose. And I think Chubb and Hunt, that 1-2 punch, may be the best running back tandem in the NFL.
I agree with
we
that.
think so. We wonder if it might be one of the best of all time, honestly, Sal, considering their age and what they both accomplished with the fact that Kareem's won a rushing title and Nick Chubb was just barely lost one last year, and they're both in the same backfield in their prime. I couldn't think historically of one better.
But, Baker will have to make a few plays in the game. The thing is that what Stefanski has done is, again, stability. And I think that has calmed Baker Mayfield down. But what's really going to calm him down is consistency. You know, in the second half of the season, I'm going to date myself here, but I learned this from Dick Vermeil and Ron Jaworski. In the second half of the season, look in the final 8 games, if you add up the number of completions plus rushing attempts. It's a simple formula, especially when you're on the road. If your completions and rushing attempts added up are more than your opposition, especially on the road, you win the game 90% of the time. And I think that's the most important thing going into this game. Stick with the run. If you, like you said it right at the beginning about Miles Sanders, if the Eagles don't stick with the run and throw the ball or drop back 65% of the time, they'll lose. And the same goes for the Browns in this game. And when you look at it, the Browns need to steal one here, right? Going down the stretch, they got 6 wins. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm looking at the AFC and how many 6-3 teams there are.
1 billion.
For 7 spots. It's super tough. It's going to be super tough. They're going to need, I think they're going to need 11 wins to get in because they probably aren't going to overtake Baltimore. You look at Baltimore's schedule. If you go down Baltimore's schedule after I get off the air, I think Baltimore can win 12 games looking at their schedule. And the Steelers will probably win somewhere around 13 or 14 looking at their schedule. In order for the Browns to get in, and I know it's a lot, they may have to get to 11. 10 may not be enough. So to me, I look at this game for both these teams, must win. The same goes for the Eagles. The Eagles have to get to 6 wins. They lose to the Browns, they don't win the division.
Must be nice to only have to get to 6 wins, and we've been dying to get to the playoffs forever, and here we are staring. We need 11 this year for whatever's going on here in the AFC, Sal. And, boy, you're right. It is a big one. I think the mentality here is very much that these are all playoff games. You look at our schedule. You took care of business against the Texans. You got the Eagles. Then you're at the Jags. Then you have tough games with the Titans, Ravens back-to-back, the 2 New York teams, which you should win. But you're going to have to beat the Titans, the Ravens, or the Steelers and hold serve elsewhere just to get to 11. You have to get 1 win out of those 3 games. So you're right. This is a critically important game for the Browns.
Yeah, it's critically important. And that's the genius of going to 7 playoff games. You know, everybody says, well, you know, you go to 7 or you go to 8 playoff teams in each conference. Anybody gets in. But no, you just hit the nail on the head. It makes every game down the stretch for everybody a playoff game.
Yeah.
It's absolutely going to be fascinating, going to be a lot of fun. Such a privilege to have you on,
Yes.
Sal. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it greatly.
Oh, thanks for having me. Have a good Thanksgiving.
You as well, Sal.
Same to you. He's the best. And a reminder that all guests, even the legends, appear on CBD. They do silver the Fifth Third money line. Fifth Third Bank making Cleveland Browns Daily a Fifth Third better. Lots more to come. Cleveland Browns Daily, 850 ESPN Cleveland. Beau Bishop for my friends at Weather Seal Home Services. Listen, they're your go-to guys for any home improvement need. It is November. There is snow on the ground, ice, wind. It's all coming. Don't get stuck in the cold with that leaky roof. Let the team at Weather Seal help with their great roof offer. Just a buck down, 7 years, 0% financing. It can get you the new roof that your home needs and have peace of mind this winter. Don't delay. Call Weather Seal today, 877-351-SEAL, or visit weathersealhomeservices.com. That sale ends at the end of this month. It's with approved credit, and prior sales are excluded. Also a reminder, tonight at 7, be sure to check out the Browns preview show. Ken Carmen, Gerard Cherry on the University Hospital's Cleveland Browns radio network as guys get you set for the Browns and the Eagles. Addition to that, the NBA draft is tonight. And right after the Browns preview show on 850 ESPN Cleveland, NBA draft special from 8 to 10. Emmett Golden, Matt Fontana, Mike Rizzo on that. Did you see the comments of the Edwards kid from Georgia?
No, but I like that kid. He seems to have a little fire. What did he say?
He says he doesn't even like, I'm paraphrasing, that he doesn't even really like basketball. It's what he does, but he doesn't even really like it. That if he had the opportunity to play football, he'd quit basketball tomorrow if he had the opportunity to play football. He goes on to say that, and I'm paraphrasing, you really should look it up, it's stunning, that Damian Lillard is not a real rapper, but that he is, and that he has something like some other rapper that I don't know. And it was, number one, I just thought, if I, on the verge of the NBA draft, I don't know if I would invest a number 1 overall pick in a guy who says they don't even like basketball. And I thought whoever does pick him, whenever they play the Blazers next year, Blazers cover Dame Dollar 90.
By $1 billion. So he's not really into basketball, more of an occupation than a love of his. I love basketball. Yeah, basketball is in my heart, but football is where I started, so I'll never forget about that. But don't get me wrong. Basketball is my number 1 because I feel like it's going to get me through a lot of stuff I need to get through. I mean, he contradicts himself. Says I'm still not really into
that is not the
but
quote.
It's in my heart. It's what I do. It's a job. I feel like I'm working right now. I love it.
That's not the quote I'm referring to.
Well, yeah, clearly the Dame Dollar one. The rapper one, look, so what? If you were that great of a rapper,
1 minute.
You wouldn't need to be playing basketball. The people who are like, I'm a rapper, I'm not an athlete, it hasn't worked out well. I feel like maybe we've seen some of that. It hasn't worked out here.
NBA Central has the transcript.
Okay, I'll go.
Of the one I'm referring
Sounds like
to.
a good read.
Really
That's a way to tank your draft stock. What are you doing?
What are you doing, Coach? What are we doing? All right, we're back tomorrow. The next level is coming up next. Thanks for listening, everybody. Cleveland Browns Daily, 850 ESPN.